Hello and welcome to the Hookshot on the Miracle Sports Network. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Nate. Today, we're going to be talking about our 2020 draft recap.
Yeah, so this is the day after the draft. We're just gonna go covering all the crazy trades and just kind of some general discussion on the draft that's been happening the past day or two. Starting out, Chris Paul got traded to the Suns teams. I don't know if I could have predicted that personally. Uh, but the Thunder were able to flip him for quite a bit than what they traded for. So it was Chris Paul and Abdel Nader for Kelly Oubre, Ricky Rubio, Ty Jerome, Jalen Leck. Is that how you pronounce his name? I think so. And then a 2022 protected first rounder. Um, Thoughts on this trade? The Suns definitely are sacrificing, I think, a little bit of their development and their core to develop. Trying to win now. Probably the bubble was a big push for that, seeing that they could easily win now, I think, playing against other good teams. And I think the Suns front office is probably just trying to capitalize on that.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see. As we've known, the Suns have been just almost like a disgrace to the league the last few years before this last season. And we're one of the worst teams in the league, even though they had the makings of a star in Devin Booker and a few other pieces. And then last year, they really started to change things around. They started a new system. Um, they signed Ricky Rubio, who I think was a tremendous impact for them, and they had some other notable guys to bring in, like Aaron Baines, who showed the ability to stretch the floor. And when DeAndre Ayton was out with a suspension, that was a really big improvement for them. But it's hard to see what's going to happen because they're not certainly not done making trades. Ricky Rubio just got traded last night in the draft. As we're recording this, Kelly Oubre has been traded to the Warriors, but we do not know yet the details on that. And we'll have to see what they end up with. But I I think the Suns will be better. Like Chris Paul is phenomenal, and I think Chris Paul is definitely an upgrade over Ricky Rubio. But the I still have some doubts about the Suns. Um, I guess kind of notably down low, their system really thrived last year when they had that stretch big and DeAndre Ayton in the bubble all of a sudden started shooting, which is a really promising sign. But next to him, it since they got rid of Oubre, it seems like they'll probably have Cam Johnson start, who is a really good shooter, and I think that might work. They also just drafted Jalen Smith at 10, who can come in and be, I think, kind of fill the Aaron Baines role. But the trade lets Oklahoma City start a rebuild. So I think it's kind of a win-win on both sides where the Suns made a really big upgrade without having to give up too much, I think. And the Thunder can start the rebuild and got extra pieces to trade, which they've already traded most of them, it seems.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I feel too strongly about this trade either way. Um, Maybe leaning a little bit towards the Thunder, who are clearly blowing it up. Also, trading Dennis Schroeder to the Lakers, and a trade I really like for the Lakers, with Rubio or not Rubio, with Rondo probably leaving. For the Suns, I don't know what you're gonna get out of Chris Paul. I mean, last season he did pretty much what nobody has ever done in their 15th year as a point guard. Just like efficiency and production and uh, kind of avoiding injuries. So his stage in his career, it really could end really poorly for the Suns. but it could also end really well, and he plays like he did last season. But I think just seeing at a guy in that point of his career, staying healthy the whole way, especially on a much shortened season, besides LeBron pretty much, that is going to be difficult to do for him, but, I know he's already practicing in Phoenix already and kinda getting ready for that transition. The Thunder, also then clear up some cap space with getting his contract off and kinda moving some pieces around, which, sets them up with some much better free agent classes coming in the future. But the trade that really stands out to me is Drew Holiday trade.
Hmm.
Um, I keep looking at this trade and I can't believe it. Drew Holiday and 2 second-round picks in the 2020 draft to the Bucks for George Hill, Eric Bledsoe, a 2020 first, a 2024, and 2026, right to swap, and then a 2025 and 2027 unprotected. I Drew Holiday is not an all-star. He's good. He's a really good perimeter player. I don't think anyone would put him in the top 15 players of the league, probably. And I'm just looking at everything the Pelicans got. 4 first-round picks, essentially, plus 2 decent players. I mean, George Hill and Eric Bledsoe aren't fantastic, but they're not just scrubs, for just Drew Holiday. Like, clearly the Bucks are, trying their best to win now and convince Giannis to stay, but wow, this is really, sacrificing their future. I mean, 2024, 2025, 26, and 27 picks are all gone. Um, I guess 2 of those years have a swap, so it's not like they get nothing, but come 4, 5, 6, 7 years from now, who knows what type of team they'll be. Giannis could easily be gone. I mean, he could re-sign and that contract be up and he leaves even at that point. So I think the Paul George trade kind of just started this crazy wave of really high value, either overvaluing decent players in the league or undervaluing draft picks. Um, Maybe a combination of both a little bit in this trade, but I'm going to give a major win for the Pelicans in this. Uh, they really seem to know what they're doing over there, especially with the Anthony Davis trade, even too. Just getting some really strong assets back in that. I really think this team, has a bright future for the Pelicans, and the Bucks, basically have no bench players. Well, I guess the, Bogdanovic trade did not go through, so they got some back, but I don't know. It'll be tough for them, I think, to win, even if they make it out of the East for whoever is playing in the West.
Yeah, I was pretty baffled when I saw this trade. I was not expecting it at all. I mean, I love Drew Holiday. He's a great player, but I don't really know if he solves the issues the that they have, because Drew Holiday is an elite defender, a really solid playmaker, very high character guy, and he can score a bit. But I think if you watch the playoffs, the Bucks really needed like that star player who could create his own shot,
Yeah.
which I think Drew Holiday can do more than anyone on the roster right now. But I don't think he's quite the level of what they really needed. And he's I mean, it could just even be a rental. He's under contract for this next season, of course, and then he has a player option the year after that. And I mean, if he just declines the player option, it could end up really poorly. And it's a lot of money. You wouldn't think, but I mean, looking like just today, Gordon Hayward declined his player option at 30+ million, and Drew Holiday's option is less than that. And I think Holiday's a better player right now than Gordon Hayward.
Yeah,
So you never
definitely.
know. But I mean, either way, it's really interesting. I don't. I want to give some credit to the Bucks though, where I think they're choosing the right thing to do, and which is going all in to keep Giannis. Um, they're like, I don't think they can just start a rebuild. There's no way they're going to get back. Like, there's no way they're going to get back enough to really try to compete. And like, even just looking at a guy like Anthony Davis, the Anthony Davis trade, I really don't think it set up the Pelicans to be a really good team. A lot of that came with the fact that they got lucky and won the lottery. So
Right.
because like Lonzo Ball, I don't know what's happening with him. It doesn't really sound like he might even be in their future plans all that much, considering they just drafted a point guard in the lottery yesterday. Ingram is clearly an all-star player, and when you add Zion into that, it really gets interesting. But there's just
I think with the Davis trade, part of that was just
not a lot of pick stuff.
circumstantial. I mean,
Yeah, but like
Davis was like forcing his way out, so to get back
I'm saying like if Giannis was
Lonzo and Brandon Ingram is such a good trade.
if Lonzo was like doing the same thing, which I think is the opposite of, I think that would be the opposite situation of what happened, where they're trying to go all in on him. I I think they're much better off going all in and trying to compete now and completely risking their future. But still, it seems a lot to give up. But on the other side, what a win for the Pelicans. Um they get Eric Bledsoe, who has some issues, but
He's not a bad player.
he's not bad. I think away from the Bucks, he could be a lot better. And George Hill was an electric 3-point shooter last year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not like super high. It wasn't like super high, like use like attempts from three, but he did lead the league in 3-point percentage. He's like 35, I think, so he's kind of winding down in his career. But there might be a contender that wants to pick that up. I think he's making like $8 million a year or so. But then you get 3 firsts and 2 pick swaps. The 2025 pick is completely unprotected. The 2027 pick is completely unprotected. That is,
Mm-hmm.
I just think that's pretty insane.
And the
They're
two
able to
pick
get back.
swaps being if the Pelicans pick is better, meaning closer to the top of the draft, or sorry, the other way around. If the Bucks pick is better, meaning closer to the top of the draft than the
Yeah, the
Pelicans have the
swaps.
right to swap first round picks, so then they get the better pick and the Bucks get the worst pick.
Like, I mean, the Pelicans already had one of the brightest futures in the league. Plus, they had some
Right.
extra picks already from the Davis trade, but this just really adds to it, how bright the future is looking.
Yeah, so let's move on to the draft. I don't know. What's your initial thoughts on the draft?
I don't know. I feel, I guess, slightly underwhelmed, if that's a proper term. I feel like I hyped myself up for it so much, and it's just, I mean, I don't think there's anything too crazy that happened. I think everything. I'm really happy with some of the picks some of the or some teams did with like fits and stuff that I would have made myself, but the I mean, it just, there weren't a lot of really crazy picks. There were some solid steals. I like a lot of fits. Um, I don't think there were any really far-fetched reaches out there until you maybe get to like the second round-ish or so. And it's just, there weren't any crazy trades that happened on draft night, really. It was just kind of a standard draft. And yeah,
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. No trades at the beginning of months of talking about, oh, are the Wolves going to trade? Are the Warriors going to trade? The Hornets really love James Wiseman. They're going to trade up, but everything kind of went about how I expected it to. I would say at the beginning, there were definitely some second rounders who fell a lot farther than I expected. But we kind of said with this draft, there's just kind of a pool of players who all of them are semi-similar, and wouldn't be surprised. There were a few names I was a little surprised to hear, but um, there's really not that much difference between some of the other guys, especially later in the second round. That just kind of if one team likes a guy for a few special characteristics, then they'll take him. But yeah, no really crazy trades. What would you say the biggest trade was the Rubio trade?
yeah, probably that 17th pick was the first pick that was. Oh, never mind. 16th pick, I guess, was the first trade pick that was traded, I believe, the
Yeah,
entire
so
draft.
it was the Wolves traded the 17th pick, which ended up being Alexei Pokusevsky to the Thunder or Ricky Rubio. What was it?
25 and
28,
28.
20 or yeah, 25 and 28. So 2 firsts plus Ricky Rubio for that 17 pick, and James Johnson is heading out to OKC as a contract match in that. But that was really the like one big trade in my opinion. I love the trade for Minnesota. I mean, I've not been high at all on Pokusevsky personally, and to bring back a player better than James Johnson and Ricky Rubio for the Wolves, bring him back to Minnesota, plus get 2 first round picks. I mean, I would have done that trade without Ricky Rubio um, for Minnesota. So doing that trade plus swapping a player I think is way better than James Johnson. I give that a big win for Minnesota.
Yeah, I really just love. Also, I guess what the Wolves did in the draft a bit, but that Rubio trade. I don't know what Rubio's role is going to be in the Timberwolves. He, I think he's certainly should be starting. Um, I think right now he's probably the third best player on the team overall. Um, so I think I would start him, and um, I think a lot of it has to be seen what will happen with like Malik Beasley. I know there's some talks about the Wolves possibly looking to move on from him. Um, I
Maybe a
guess
sign and trade or something there.
if Edwards starts on the bench or if he starts, I certainly think Edwards with his size. I mean, he's 6'5". There have been some reports of him being 6'6" now and growing, but he's like 235. He's a big body for 5, and he has a near 7-foot wingspan. I think he can certainly play the 3 at the NBA level, but I think his best position is the traditional 2 spot.
Is he
And
6'5"?
I mean, I've seen him
Um,
listed 6'5" everywhere.
ESPN lists him at 6'3".
Well,
That's just what I'm looking at
ESPN's
for
only one.
recap right now.
I don't know why ESPN had him at 6'3". Everywhere else has him at 6'5".
Okay, he's probably 6'5" then.
I mean, either way, like I mean, the Wolves were playing Josh Okogie at small forward for a large chunk of games, especially at the end of the season last year, and Edwards is definitely a bigger body than Okogie. But the Ricky Rubio, I mean, I think I have a lot of bias towards Rubio. I mean, we're both Timberwolves fans, and Rubio is one of my favorite players of all time. Growing up watching him, and like when he was young, coming over to the Timberwolves, but even trying to come away with a non-biased approach to it, um, I think Rubio is a tremendous fit in Minnesota, where Minnesota's offensive system, uh, it's one of the very analytical offensive systems in the league where they don't like mid-range shots. They love shots right under the basket and from three. So, so as a result, their system really looks for three big things, which are playmakers, cutters, and shooters. And Rubio is one of the most elite playmakers in the league and passers.
Mhm.
He's ever since he stepped into the league, he's been near the top in assist totals, I guess. Um, his defense is very underrated. I mean, it's very passive, but so he's not like a super aggressive defender. But when you have as many people that are going to complain about the defense, personally don't worry about it as much as a lot of other people will. But trying to make up for that lack of defense from your two superstars, and arguably some guys like Edwards, who his big issue is his effort level on defense, especially. Having a really stable guy with Rubio. Also, he's now kind of that big vet in the team, and I think Ricky Rubio is a tremendous character guy, a guy who can really help lead the team. You look at his stats, especially noticeably like on the court and off the court. The Suns were an incredibly better team with him on the court rather than off the court. I think Ricky Rubio is really that big change that made them all of a sudden become a lot better. His facilitating is he's one of the best just passers and playmakers, as I've said, and having guys who can really shoot around him. Looking back in his Minnesota days, really that big shooter he had was Kevin Love, and
Mhm.
we know what kind of numbers Kevin Love put up in Minnesota, where now you have arguably the best shooting big man of all time in Towns. Anthony Edwards, who I think is an, one of the best natural scorers in the last few drafts, and D'Angelo Russell, who has proven to be one of the best young scorers in the league of overall just going out and getting a shot, and also another playmaker where and Ricky Rubio's shooting, I think could be a little underrated. Last year he shot, just off the top of my head, I think he shot about 36% from three, which is about league
Yeah, and I
average.
think he was
But yeah, he shot
41%,
41 on catch and shoot,
off catch and shoot, yeah.
which is what he would be doing with the Timberwolves. He'd be shooting on the catch and shoots. But I think Rubio just is a guy who contributes to winning basketball and just goes completely unnoticed by the rest of the league. I mean,
Yeah, I
he's
mean, he was what, 3rd in assists last year, I think,
I believe
in the
so.
entire NBA?
I mean, he's beloved by Timberwolves fans, and I think there's a reason there. He went to Utah, and he's adored by Utah fans. Um, the Suns fans also just love him. They really appreciate what he's done for the team, and I don't think it's a coincidence that everywhere he goes, he's adored by the fans for both what he can do on the court and off the court, and in the trade, just the two picks alone, trading down to 25 and 28, I think you could argue is worth 17. But the fact that you get uh what I consider a high quality starter, in the fact that as he's consistent, um he's just he just kind of does there's a lot of things he just does really well, and there's not a whole lot of things he has issues with. His issues kind of always been his shooting, but he certainly made big strides in that last season, where I just think that's a fantastic trade to get a player like that back. Plus those two extra picks is just an insane value, I think.
Yeah. Not to highlight the Wolves so much, but, I also like the pairing of him and D'Lo, D'Angelo Russell together. Uh, Rubio showed, shooting ability off the catch and shoot, If he's not the lead guard, Russell being one of the elite pick and roll players in the league with Towns especially would just be an excellent matchup. And Rubio also being able to facilitate, whether that is to Towns or Russell or maybe Anthony Edwards. It's hard to say. Um, but I think the Wolves' time has to be now or very soon. I mean, just looking at it, they have very high draft capital of players on their team. Not necessarily all of it is theirs, but I mean, Edwards and Towns both number 1 picks. Russell was he number 2 or number 3?
Oh, the second.
Yeah, he was number 2. I mean, Rubio's in the later stage of his career, but he was top
He's
10, I
5.
believe. He was 5. And then Jarrett Culver, if he can turn out to something, was 6 last year. So you clearly have very high talented guys, and most of them are pretty young. But now the Wolves need to convert.
Yeah, I mean, I've been seeing it. I know you've disagreed a little, but I think the Wolves are going to compete this season for a playoff spot. And I think what they did in the draft certainly probably help them. They didn't really add anyone who I think is going to have a big impact year one with their later picks.
No.
But I mean, Rubio and Edwards, you're adding them and just getting everyone healthy. I think the Wolves have a really underrated culture. And I think guys like Rubio is really going to help that. I think Anthony Edwards is a pretty great kid. And despite, some issues he's had, and Jaden McDaniels is a guy who's had some off-court issues, but I think coming to the culture that I see Minnesota building, I think it's a really good fit for him, and I think the Wolves are going to surprise some people next year. I might just be saying this all biased, but I mean, the Wolves are the team I know the most about, being a fan of them, and I think they could surprise next year.
Yeah, having the play-in tournament definitely helps them, where the 7 through 10 seeds are all competing for the last 2 spots.
Mm-hmm.
It's the West is just so tough.
Yeah.
I mean, just glancing at the teams in the West, see if I just look at the teams. Just looking at last year's standings, I mean, the Wolves finished second to last in the West. Golden State, just lost Klay Thompson today, done for the year towards Achilles. But you have to assume Golden State, even with healthy Steph, probably adding Kelly Oubre, who isn't terrible, is definitely competing up there. The Pelicans are probably looking to take another step this year. Maybe it could be similar. I think a lot of that depends on Zion. Brandon Ingram being really quality, but trading Drew Holiday has to hurt them a little bit, but they'll be in the mix. The Kings probably are not looking to be in the mix right now. Same with the Spurs. Suns just got Chris Paul, so you would think they improve as well. The Grizzlies, if Drew Holiday, and then you're looking at all the playoff teams from last year. Portland, I mean, they'll obviously be solid. The Mavericks, Jazz, Thunder will probably take a step down. Probably not be in the mix there. The Rockets, if they trade Harden, might fall out, but you have to count them in. And then you got Denver and the Clippers and the Lakers. So, I mean, even at that, I think it's asking a lot for the Wolves to even get to that 10 spot. But I think they're probably a lot more competitive than
Yeah.
last season.
I'd agree. I'm not saying that they're going to make a playoff spot, but I think they're going to be at that bottom of the West competing with all the other teams.
Yeah, the West is just tough this year.
I think they have just as good a shot as anyone in the bottom of that West to make it in the playoffs. One of those end spots.
Moving on to the rest of the draft, I mean, we have all the other picks. Any pick really stand out to you?
Um, yeah, there's a lot of sleepers, or I mean not sleepers, but I guess really good values. Um, just looking at, I mean, what I'll say, what I've done here is put, uh, I had my big board and I put every single pick as like their pick number opposed to my big board and to see what the net difference is to find like where I find the top values and um I guess just sorting by um value there. The I mean overall, I think Philadelphia had some of the biggest steals in the draft. I think based on, I mean, clearly, I think someone who's a steal, like maybe if a guy in the top 10, for example, maybe he's like top 10 on my board and he's like 6 spots away, like after where he was on my board, that's clearly something I think that has way more value than a guy who's maybe picked like 20 spots out later than when he's already like rated as like an early second, but maybe goes like a late second. And looking at stuff like that, um, Tyrese Maxey is really sticks out as a tremendous value there.
Yeah, that's one of my big steals too.
I had him at number 12 on my board, and he got picked at 21st, which just alone was the 8th highest value in terms of just flat out pick, but that gets amplified by how highly he was rated, I think, and he's just such a great talent. I think he's one of the guys who's most ready to come in and compete. He I think his defense is really good. He shows great scoring potential. And I mean, I don't think the fit is probably ideal, but it's such a great value. But then
Just
also,
getting best player available right there.
yeah, but
It's
they
a
also
lot.
had overall what was my number one steal based on just value, which was Paul Reed at 58, who Paul Reed is he's an athletic four who can probably play a little bit of center, who I thought was a first round talent. I had him 27 on my board, and he fell to 58, which is a 31 pick difference. I really just don't understand why Paul Reed fell so far. His defensive skills are fantastic. Um, I think his offensive skills I mean, they're not quite as long as his defensive skills, but they might be a little underrated. I That's a fantastic pick. And then the other pick, Isaiah Joe, at 49. I had him 32nd on my board, which is a 17 pick difference, which is the third biggest steal overall. And Isaiah Joe is one of the best shooters in the draft. The Sixers desperately need shooting, and they certainly added it with Isaiah Joe. He's a very thin frame, but I think you put him in an NBA weight program, that'll be fine. He shows some other promises like a team defender. His might be able to. I think his defense will come along as he puts on weight. And also, they made a trade. They traded Josh Richardson and the 36th pick and got back Seth Curry from the Mavs. And um, I it's an interesting trade. I think Josh Richardson is a better player, but Seth Curry is one of the most elite shooters in the league right now. And for a team that desperately needs shooting, I think that's a really great trade. And but a guy like Tyrese Maxey is a guy is who I think he's really talented offensively and defensively, which is similar to Josh Richardson. So to be able to trade him for a guy like Seth Curry, who I think is on a very great contract, about 8 mil a year for the next like 3 years. I think Philly probably comes away as my big winner on draft night.
Yeah. So those are based on your opinions. Um, I didn't have Paul Reed as high as you did. Definitely, I had him kind of my mid, the earlier second round. And there's just so many of these second round caliber guys that them to fall off. It's hard to say. The pick I think it stands out to me the most is Tyrell Terry, which is funny because I see him a lot as Seth Curry a little bit, I think. Um, and he's going to the Mavericks. So, especially with these rumors going around that Tyrell Terry had grown 2 inches, he put on some weight. He's going to be a really solid pick. I thought, oh, that immediately bumps him up into the late, like right after the lottery, slash early 20s. I kind of saw him as being maybe like a 20 to 25 pick in the first round, but to get him at the top of the second round, I think is really good pick for Dallas. I think he can contribute off the bench right away on a team that projects to be good and could be a little bit of a sleeper there in the second round. Another pick that really stands out to me is Aaron Nesmith. Vanderbilt went pick 14 to the Celtics. He's a guy I'm really high on. He shot over 50% from three last season in college. He's another guy I think can really just come in and contribute right away. Um, Elite 3-point shooter, not the best on defense. Has also been coming off an injury, so it's been quite a while since he's been playing meaningful games. But I think he can be kind of like Duncan Robinson, maybe. All he does is kind of stand in the corner and shoot threes. But probably not as good as Duncan Robinson right away his rookie year. But I think he could be like a Tyler Hero type of contributor, where he's getting some meaningful playing time on another quality team. And then Tyrese Maxey. I would say looking at those, there are definitely some steals late in the second round, in my opinion, but those 3 picks really stand out to me the most. Um, then probably even I like the fit of Trey Jones to San Antonio. Uh, Trey being a very defensive oriented player, probably the best defensive point guard in the draft by far. And kind of be more of a facilitator. I think he just really fits the style that San Antonio likes to play, a very defensive team. Um, very high efficiency. Um, looking to be a very high efficient team there in San Antonio. I think Trey Jones is a great pick.
Yeah, I don't really disagree with any of those. I mean, I wasn't quite as high on Neesmith. He,
Yeah, Neesmith's draft position is probably about fair.
yeah, I
I
agree
just
with that.
like
But
him. I just like him to Boston. I like the fit there.
yeah, I
Going
think
to a good team. That he can contribute on right away. I think he really could.
one team I really want to highlight here is the Detroit Pistons. I think they had a really interesting night. um, I think the big thing with Detroit is I think they really kind of shaped their future a bit with this draft. They, I think they're not that it was necessarily bad, but I think they had one of the bleakest futures out of all the teams in the league.
Mhm.
I mean, Blake Griffin he's been hurt. He played really well with Detroit before he got hurt, but I mean, he's on a really big contract. He's not a guy for the future. Derrick Rose has probably been their best player with Blake being out, but he's entering his 30s and not really part of the future either. And just for young talent, I mean, Seku's probably their best piece. I think Seku has a
Yep.
lot of potential and is a really good piece there. I mean, Christian Wood, I think, is really talented. He's a UFA, so we'll see if he resigns. But he's not like super young. He's like 24. And I mean, they had like Luke Kennard, who's a really good shooter, and Bruce Brown, who I think shows a lot of potential as a 3D role player. But I mean, they ship off Bruce Brown. They ship out Luke Kennard, which is probably my most questionable thing they did. If there's anything I'm gonna complain about with Detroit, it's shipping out Luke Kennard. I mean, I think at the trade deadline they were in talks to trade Kennard to the Suns for like their first round pick and something else, but it just kind of fell through at the last second. And to trade him for pick 19, just I think Kennard has more value there. But they are also realizing that I guess Kennard and Brown are both two young guys who have paydays coming up.
Mm.
And they can trade him out for a guy in a 4-year rookie deal. And to consider the fact that they got Sadiq Bey, who I think is a really big steal from there because I had him 14 on my board. Getting him 5 picks later at 19 is a really great value. And I think he can be a really solid scorer. But looking at what they added, with the 7th pick, I think Killian Hayes fell into their lap. I am incredibly high on Killian Hayes. I had him ranked 3rd on my board, which is higher than a lot of people do, I know. But there's just so much to like about Killian Hayes. I find his playmaking is elite. I think he's the 2nd best playmaker behind LaMelo in this class. I think he shows a lot of potential as a scorer. His big issue is the fact that he only really uses his left hand. He doesn't use his right hand finishing. But I think there's so much potential there. And for him to go to a team that really needs a point guard for the future in Detroit, I think it's fantastic. I've had him mocked to Detroit for a long time, just kind of based on I don't think he was going to go to one of those top teams. And then they got Isaiah Stewart with 16, who I don't think anyone would have had Isaiah Stewart as high as 16. I
No.
mean, I texted you on draft night and said one of my big predictions was Isaiah Stewart going in the top 20. I don't really know why. I just kind of thought he would, and he did. He went
It
at
happened.
16. I guess kind of a lot of my weird draft predictions kind of happened, but Isaiah Stewart is a guy. The more I watch him, the more I like him. I think he has a lot of. I think he has a lot of skill down in the paint, and granted, that's not that's not the direction the league is moving. It's, he's just so good down there. I think I would maybe consider him the best just paint offensive player. Where I mean, there's guys like Onyeka Okongwu, who's a terrific like dunker and rim runner. James Wiseman, who shows a lot of potential, just kind of as an overall scorer. But just as far as actual down in the paint skills, Stewart might be up there with the best of them. He's like 6'9" with like a 7'4" wingspan, which I think is solid height for a center in the modern NBA. He's incredibly strong. Just looking at him, you can tell how strong he is. But there's been, I guess, kind of the reason I thought he'd maybe go so high is there's been so many reports coming out that he's just such a high character guy and an incredibly hard worker, and his work is almost just inspiring with how hard he works and is a really big leader. And if he develops a shot, I think he'd be really good. I don't really think he does. I think he projects more as a backup, probably maybe a high end backup, I would say, which at 16 isn't great, but to bring in a character like that and a team that's rebuilding is really great. And Sadiq Bey is a guy who I think is going to start small forward along with Sekou. And I think Bey, there's nothing overly flashy about him, but he's as well a tremendous worker. I think he's a really good scorer. I really like Sadiq Bey there with Detroit. And then they got Saban Lee in the second, who was my worst value pick overall wise. He ranked 60 out of 60 on my value picks. But I mean, it's just a second round pick. He's very athletic at point, but I don't think he really adds a whole lot. That's not really a pick that contributes there. But I mean, also I guess with Isaiah Stewart, that 16th pick, they essentially just kind of bought the pick. The Rockets are in some sort of situation they're in a weird situation, no matter how you want to put it. But they really needed cap space, so they traded Trevor Ariza, who they just got in a trade, and for a very incredibly heavily protected first round pick for Detroit, and maybe like 2025 or something like that. And so they were able to get back that really heavily protected pick. If Detroit basically makes the playoffs within the next like 5 or 6 years, they'll get a late. You still get a late first for it, and they got a trade exception out of it. So considering that Detroit didn't actually really give up a whole lot to get Isaiah Stewart, makes you feel a little better about the pick as well. But I think all of a sudden they have a core for the future, which is not something I would have said on draft night, or
No.
I guess coming into this, I would have even thought, even if like best case scenario for me basically was Killian Hayes fell to them at 7. And even so, like looking for the future, you have, I mean, Killian Hayes, Sekou, solid pieces, but then like guys like Kennard, who I think is a solid starter, but he's going to be getting paid. He's a little older than those guys. They got guys who more fit that timeline. They ended up having 3 picks in the top 20, which was unexpected. And I really like the direction they've been heading.
Yeah, I would say they definitely kind of have an identity now.
Yeah.
Killian Hayes, I also had mocked to them since we did our first mock draft a few months ago, really. I really liked the fit for them there. And then, like you said, a really good value pick at Sadiq Bey. I think I also had him at the end of my lottery, if I remember right. And Isaiah Stewart, not super high on that pick as much, but
No, but
he's another younger, um, quality player. I think he's got a really high floor. I think you kind of just know what you're going to get for with him. So yeah, they definitely have a bright future. They will not be a good team this year because of those picks, but overall, a good draft for them. I'm curious what your thoughts on Patrick Williams at 4. That pick
yeah,
surprised me. Didn't see him going that high. Knew there are some teams high on him. Personally, just think he's just super, super, super raw. I don't know how much I see the upside on him necessarily,
yeah.
but I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Patrick Williams is a guy I've been higher on than most people have, where he's a late riser. I mean, I didn't have him as high as 4, but I mean, I don't hate the pick. I really
That's kind of how
see
I feel.
him.
I'm like, oh, it's fine. It's just kind of unexpected.
I really see him being a 4 at the next level. I think he's. I think. I mean, I had 11 on my big board, which I think is also higher than some people do. I mean, it's a little lower than I guess some people do as well, but I mean, just looking in like the top 10 on my board, especially like all the guys there, I think either just have higher floors or incredibly high ceilings and higher ceilings, and that's the reason Williams comes in at 11 for me. He never started a game in college, which is weird, but is at Florida State, which
Yeah, it's a thing Florida State does.
they kind of do that. I mean, that's back-to-back drafts now. They've had someone drafted in the first round who never started a single game for them in college with Kabengele last year. And it's weird, but Williams, I mean, I see people going out saying he's like one of the best wing defenders in the draft. I don't see that I don't see him as one of the best wing defenders. I think he's really good defensively, but I mean, it's certainly a plus and it's something promising for the future. He shows potential as a good shooter. I wouldn't call him like a fantastic shooter, but once again, he shows potential for that. He's one of the youngest players in the draft. There's just a lot of potential there, which is why I think the Bulls did it. I guess one of my bold picks as well going to this was Patrick Williams going in the top 5 just based on what I've been seeing coming into draft night, which, I mean, I'm not saying I agree with it. Just kind of also like how I wouldn't probably agree with Isaiah Stewart in the top 20. Kind of something I was just thinking, and I didn't think he was going to go to Chicago. I think there were guys I'd rather have in Chicago with there were some great playmakers available. Tyrese Halliburton was, that's another guy we can talk about, but him falling to 12 in Sacramento, I wouldn't have been surprised if he went at 4. Just, he's a guy who does a lot of stuff right, and he's doesn't need the ball in his hands, which is a really great piece to complement with guys like Kobe White and Zach LaVine, which is just kind of rare to see. Or Killian Hayes, who I had 3rd on my board, is, I guess, mocking someone on draft day. I'd have him mocked to the Bulls at 4, just kind of on overall ceiling, but the fact that he's a great playmaker. Because I think part of the issue with the Bulls is you look at their core and there's just too much overlap for me. Kobe White and Zach LaVine are both really great scorers, and they're great at it, but Kobe White is it. I mean, I like the pick, but just Kobe White being the scorer conflicts with Zach LaVine being a scorer. I don't really see how having both of them out there really moves your team forward if you're going to have to just basically end up trading one of them. I feel similarly about their post players. I've been pretty vocal about that in this podcast, where I don't think Markkanen and Carter can play together. Markkanen has a lot of offensive potential. He had a down year, sure, but he's a center. I don't really think there's any arguing against it. The issue is he can't play center because he can't defend at all, and which means you're forced to put him out at the 4. But you see guys like Patrick Williams being more of the typical 4, and Markkanen can't guard guys who are athletic and basically just the 4 spot in the league nowadays is just kind of everyone's expected to shoot. So everyone's power forwards can shoot now, where it means Markkanen's gonna have to guard more on the perimeter. I just don't see it working out. I'd pick Carter Jr. in that spot because I think Carter Jr. is the best piece and most stable piece for them to build around in their lineup, because I think they have to make changes. Patrick Williams is a guy who I don't think quite conflicts as much as the Markkanen and I guess the Markkanen Carter and LaVine White issues are. But I see him projecting as a 4. I think he's a great guy to play at the 4 in the future next to Carter. But I just think this has to be the end of Markkanen in Chicago.
Yeah, it's time for Chicago to start picking some players. Like you said, there's just so much overlap there.
There's definitely guys they could have picked that wouldn't have so much overlap.
Right.
As opposed to Williams, but
there's decisions that need to be made
like
there,
Williams
for their future.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So we've been going for a while. To finish off, is there what's one pick that you think is just a bad pick? Like whether it's really bad fit or a player that went too high compared to where you thought they would go. Um, I've got
Um,
one. Probably my least favorite pick is Jalen Smith at number 10 to Phoenix. Jalen Smith's a guy that I'm much lower on than most people. Um, I have him as a very late second round, or very late first rounder. Um, I don't think he has a strength to be a post player in the NBA. That can be improved, but I think he's just going to get bullied a lot in the post on defense. Offense, he's a decent 3-point shooter. Um, I don't say anything above average by any means. Um, and I don't see him scoring a lot, playmaking wise or anything, besides pretty much a post up or a spot up three. But I don't see him scoring on post ups due to his kind of lack of, especially lower body strength and um, just being kind of an average 3-point shooter. The Suns are trying to win now. I think there's a lot better people than Jalen Smith they could have drafted to come off the bench because I think he's very raw for a team like them. I mean, even you just look at the picks after them, Devin Vassell going immediately after them, I think would have been a better pick. Aaron Neesmith could come in and contribute. Even Tyrese Halliburton, I think, could play off the bench for them. But Jalen Smith, I really don't see him playing minutes on this team, and I think was almost like 20 spots too high for him. So being a lottery pick, I have that as like my least favorite pick of the draft.
yeah, looking similarly, I have um I guess there's kind of two picks that stick out for me like that. Um being Obi Toppin to the Knicks and Cole Anthony to the Magic. Uh I don't hate either of these picks though at all. I mean, I guess Jalen Smith kind of fits that mold for me too. I don't hate the pick. I think he's going to fill that like Aaron Baines role. It's just more 10 is a little high. Obi Toppin is, I think he's underrated by a lot of people when they just talk about, they like to just trash on his defense. Sure, his defense isn't great, but Obi Toppin is that prototypical power forward of the current NBA. He's, I think he has a very high chance to be rookie of the year just because I think he's going to put up big numbers as a rookie. He's definitely ready to play offensively. Um, he's 22, which is certainly a lot older than these guys getting picked early. But I don't hate the pick at all. Like I really do actually kind of like the fit with Obi Toppin. The big thing is I think his shot has to develop. Um, it, I think it might. I'm not quite as sold as maybe some other people in the draft as their shot selling. Um, but if you have Mitchell Robinson, who's clearly not a shooter, down there in center, and you have uh, even more so that guy you put next to Mitchell Robinson has to develop that shot and playing alongside RJ Barrett, who desperately needs those shooters. And I that's my biggest concern there. But just looking at the guys on the board, um, I mean, Denny Avdia is a guy I had fifth on my board. I would have loved to see him go to New York with him still being available. Tyrese Halliburton probably would have been my pick there, just as a guy who he's just kind of that rare guy who does so many things so well, but doesn't need the ball in his hands. So you can play him against a lot of people, like RJ Barrett, who needs the ball in his hands. Plus, he could either be a point guard or shooting guard. Where RJ Barrett, they haven't really decided if they want him at shooting guard or small forward. And Halliburton gives them the flexibility where either those guys could be the 1 and the 2 or the 2 and the 3. So they could either add a 3 next to them or they could add another point guard. Kyra Lewis may not have even been bad. as I think he has a really high ceiling. But I mean, Devin Vassell as well could have been a really good defender and a guy who can shoot for them. I don't hate the pick of Obi Toppin at all. I just think there's better options. And kind of similar with Cole Anthony, I think he and Markel Fultz are very similar players
Yeah,
where
definitely.
it feels a little redundant. I think Cole Anthony has a lot of potential, and he may just have as good of a shot as most of these guys in this draft to become a star. But I think his athleticism is a little overrated. I think his shooting is underrated. He's not really a playmaker. I know Orlando wants to run 2 point guards, but it's pretty similar just to Toppin. I don't hate the pick. There's maybe some guys I would have picked over him, like if you just want a 6'3" guard like that to play, I would have taken Tyrese Maxey over Cole Anthony. Sadiq Bey, I would have considered over him too. And it's just kind of one of those picks that both of them were pretty early on, and just not picks that I love the fit of necessarily.
Yeah, I'd agree with those. I think Obi Toppin is like Carmelo Anthony, but worse, which I find kind of funny going in the Knicks. But yeah, it'll be interesting what they're doing. They just cleared a whole bunch of cap by waiving and not picking up contracts on players today. So um, I don't know. Maybe they are looking to do a big move, signing a big guy this offseason. I honestly think they're going to get Fred VanVleet. With VanVleet saying he just wants to get paid, he doesn't care where he goes, and he's one of the better free agents. So I think
Yeah, I think that'd be a great
The
signing.
Knicks will just like overpay for him, and he'll be happy, and they'll be happy because they actually have a good player. Um, but yeah, I think that probably does it for today. Mm,
Well, thanks for listening this week. Make sure to rate us 5 stars on your preferred podcast platform. This will help other listeners find our podcast. Next week, we'll probably be talking about free agency as that
yeah,
opens
probably free agency, and
in a
if
couple
this Harden
days.
trade ever goes down,
Yeah, but once again, we're just kind of in that stage where we kind of have to wait and see what happens. But for sure, we should have some free agents signed. There'll probably be some more trades, but we'll just have to wait and see.
yeah. So you can find us on social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook as Miracle Sports Network, and on Twitter at Miracle Sports NW. And then we also post our podcast to YouTube, and that is also on our Miracle Sports Network. And then you can catch all of our previous episodes either on your podcast platform or on our website at anchor.com/thehookshot. Anchor.com/thehookshot. There you can see um, where all the places that our podcast is distributed. I know we're also on Apple, though that's not listed on our podcast or on our website for some reason. It should be listed there, but if you search for us on Apple Podcasts, we are also on that. But on that note, we will see you next week.